have this conversation, pull in your questions. Once again, use Q&A if you have anything that you would like to share with us. Second thing, it's about the theme for our conversation. As I said, we have been seeing digital technologies accelerate, but also we're seeing manufacturing regaining importance around the globe, across geographies. So how are those things connected? What is this new era of manufacturing? What are the opportunities? How can companies and countries leverage new technologies in order to be part of this new manufacturing era? Finally, in terms of the logistics, as I said, we have initial remarks, and then we will join this group conversation. We are recording the session. It will be available afterwards at the GFCC YouTube channel. So please join us there and share the links for our upcoming conversations. And if you are on Twitter, we will be tweeting about this session using the GFCC hashtag that is @DGFCC. So please join the conversation in social media too. Having said that, let me briefly comment and introduce about each one of our speakers, starting with Deborah. Deborah comes with an amazing background that combines government and private sector, and I think one of the most privileged people in the globe today to see the connections between technology and manufacturing and how they have evolved and continue to evolve in the globe. Deborah is the president and CEO of the Council on Competitiveness in the United States, and we are lucky to have her as the president of the GFCC. Joining us from Australia, we have Alex Subich, who is the vice president for RMIT University. Alex, and just as we're getting started, I really want to thank you for encouraging us to address this topic of digital manufacturing. The conversation that I had with you and Jeff Connolly at Siemens Australia was very inspiring in terms of understanding the challenges, but also what we need to do to develop skills in the manufacturing space. It's wonderful to have you here, Alex.
Pleasure, Roberto, pleasure.
From Colorado, we have Bryn Watson. Bryn is the vice president for Lockheed Martin Corporation, a GFCC member. We're very proud to have you and Lockheed Martin as a member of the GFCC, Bryn. Bryn has been leading digital transformation at Lockheed Martin across geographies and business units. We are delighted to have you here, Bryn.
Thank you.
From Australia, but originally from Germany and having worked across the globe in Europe, in the United States, and now in Australia, we have Michael Freni. Michael is a senior executive at Siemens, driving everything digital. So thank you so much for joining, Michael. We will hear from you, I know, not just about technology, but how to develop capabilities across the industries, and that's very important. From Ireland, we have Paul Maiden, Director for the Centre of Competitiveness, one of our GFCC members. Paul, we're very proud to have the Centre as a member, to have you here with us. You have been working with mid-size SMEs, a very important topic. So we look forward to hear from you. From Brazil, or based in Brazil, we have Paulo Pires. Paulo is a vice president for Embraer, the aircraft aerospace company. He oversees manufacturing with an incredible career in manufacturing operations, driving digital manufacturing at Embraer across the globe. Paulo, great to be here. My colleague Chad Evans, who was here a few minutes ago, was with me at Embraer in a series of GFCC University Leaders a year ago. We learned a lot. We look forward to hearing from you now. And finally, we have Pelayo joining us from Chile. Pelayo has an amazing career that includes media in the past, civil society, and is one of the key leaders driving digitalization in Chile with the País Digital, or digital country, or the Chile Digital Foundation. We are very happy, and it's great to engage Chile in our organization in this conversation. So without further ado, I really want to turn to you, Deborah, for your initial remarks before we turn to our colleagues and guests here. For all of you who are attending this conversation, once again, we are tweeting about that. Join us in social media. Share your questions here using the Q&A feature. This is a very important topic. We're happy to have you. Deborah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roberto, and let me thank you for your leadership of the GFCC and the stimulating conversations, and also formally welcome our very distinguished group of speakers, panelists that hail from around the world with tremendous individual experience, but collectively, I think it's really a dream team for discussing the acceleration of the digitization of manufacturing and how this is impacting every dimension of business, as well as how we live and prosperity. I thought I'd just start out by sharing something that takes me back a little bit in my career, but I believe the digitization of manufacturing, its transformation, its acceleration is in some ways a back to the future story, because it was some 40 years ago in the United States when there was a strong recognition that the nation's innovation capacity, its national security, and its standard of living really was directly linked to prowess and production in advanced manufacturing. And as some of you may recall, there were fierce manufacturing competitive races underway in certain sectors of the economy, autos in particular, machine tools, et cetera, and a lot of leadership coming out of Japan in new manufacturing processes, focusing on total quality management, et cetera. So I thought, this would set a stage a little bit, because back then there was a comment that was made that, gee, no one will go into the manufacturing enterprise. Young people don't want to be in manufacturing. Everything's software. And the rubric was, well, manufacturing's dirty, dumb, dangerous, and disappearing. And fast forward 40 years, and we've been saying this for a long time at the Council on Competitiveness, manufacturing is smart, it's safe, it's sustainable, and it's surging. And this has really happened now increasingly at warp speed in the aftermath and during the global pandemic. We know that there was a slow but steady transformation underway, driven by the array and connectivity of a myriad digital technologies, digital design tools, high performance computing, modeling and simulation at the edge, sensors and big data for production control and optimization, use of cyber physical systems, of course, such as robots and autonomous vehicles, and of course, managing digital networks for operations and supply chain coordination. The pandemic turned this upside down. We saw massive disruption in global supply chains. We also saw the focus on efficiency and cost, perhaps being too much at the forefront versus an emphasis on resiliency, performance, and security. And speaking from a US perspective right now, I will say that it was very shocking to the United States, the dependency of our nation on the outsourcing of critical production in pharmaceuticals and medical devices, and how dependent we were on supply chains that in a pandemic have really collapsed. But the good news, and we're going to hear this from our panelists, is that the transformation into smart manufacturing and all that it entails with how people are being trained, how they learn, and how they perform is accelerating in a positive way. And there's a broad recognition in nations around the world that manufacturing cannot be outsourced. Every nation has to have a capability in the 21st century manufacturing enterprise, and that one of the new platforms for manufacturing, just to be in the game, is sustainability as well in materials and life cycle. So let me stop there and just come back to manufacturing being smart, safe, sustainable, and surging, and look forward to hearing from our distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And Alex, so I really wanted to turn over to you. And if you could maybe share a bit what is digital manufacturing? What's your view, and what you have been doing in Australia to develop the capabilities that are needed to make that happen in practice? And everybody, if we could just respect 4 minutes, let's be quick, and then we'll have a fantastic conversation again. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roberto and Deborah, for a wonderful introduction, and such a pleasure to be part of this leadership dialogue involving our colleagues from around the world. It's essential that we exchange our experiences, insights, and best practice and share ideas, because I think the next stage of development for all of us will come through that hyperconnectivity, through that engagement across the borders, helping each other to understand better the frontiers we have embarked on. Well before the COVID pandemic breakout, we have embarked on the fourth industrial revolution, and that has impacted every sector, and perhaps the manufacturing sector initially more than many other sectors, because it's such an enormous influencing sector that involves a great number of jobs, that has, as Deborah said, a profound impact on many other aspects of the society, of supply chains, on the skill sector, and so on. And that evolution of the fourth industrial transformation across the sector has been accelerated, as you pointed out, Roberto, during COVID. We've seen, as Deborah mentioned, how important it is to have sovereign capability in manufacturing, to be able to produce, equipment at scale and at pace, using advanced manufacturing techniques that are, where you can produce bespoke equipment, products, high value-add products at scale and pace, and at a cost that permits, that development at that kind of a level. And that is where you're taking away the labor cost as the competitive advantage, and actually using creativity, ideas, and value add as the key driver. In Australia, we've established a number of not only think tanks, but committees and working task forces to actually help accelerate this transformation, starting from the realization that the manufacturing sector in Australia involves around 95% of SMEs. When you have a sector that comprises of around 95% of SMEs, you realize that you have to develop more innovative way of clustering and engaging with the sector, in select areas that are aligned with the national industry growth areas, in order to help that transformation, in order to fast track that transformation for the benefit of the nation. We've commenced with the Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 task force more than 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago. I was privileged to be a member on that task force, including our colleagues from Siemens and from SAP, Australian Industry Group, and so on. And that collective task force has established a number of important international relationships, including with German Industry 4.0 platform, US as well, and engaged in developing a roadmap, a strategy, and unfolding what Industry 4.0 means, what digital manufacturing means for Australia. From that, we've stemmed a number of important national initiatives. One of those is the one that I lead, is around establishing the National Industry 4.0 test labs, one in each state, which is now as a platform providing a basis to scale that up and expand the network with new test labs, because the whole point of that is to establish standard practice and scale of engagement with industry to support transformation. The Industry 4.0 test labs are aligned with different priority areas of Australian growth industry sector portfolio. As Deborah mentioned, we were looking at areas of automation, cyber physical systems, advanced materials, but also sustainability and clean energy supporting manufacturing at scale, as well as the Australian resources industry, liquid natural gas, new frontier technologies, as well as other resources, and so on. Agricultural technologies, bringing Industry 4.0 in processing industry, and so on. And that's coupled with a scaled up pilot program in education and training, where we are rolling out a higher apprenticeship in Industry 4.0, diplomas and associate degrees, and establish a continuum of education and training across digital skills development, putting skills at the heart as an enabler of our Industry 4.0 transformation. So it's a multifaceted, multi-layered approach that aims to create a much better interconnected ecosystem where you're developing a number of elements that are essential for success in this transformation. I think that this is culminating now with the national federal government releasing the new modern manufacturing strategy, which we were looking forward to and influencing its development, because what that does is it states that Australia has been a manufacturing nation, Australia will stay a manufacturing nation, and our future is in digital transformation of manufacturing to develop sovereign capability to create new jobs and to enable value creation across the value chain well beyond manufacturing, but stemming from manufacturing. I'll leave it at that.
Alex, thank you so much. And I think that you touched upon a very critical topic that we had a chance to talk in the past, that is creating scalable models to develop the capabilities that are needed in society. So thanks for commenting on that. And Michael, I want to turn to you as an industry leader who's really at the forefront of those technologies and also their application. In a few minutes, we'll have a poll coming here for people in attendance, just for you all to share your ideas on what are some of the key technologies. But Michael, I want to turn to you to hear from you. How can we use in practice those different technologies? What is key? What are you seeing around in Australia, around the globe? Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Roberto, and thanks, Alex. And first and foremost, thanks for having the opportunity to be on this panel. And let me start with a question. Is digitalization trend and fashion, or is it technology with a purpose? And it may sound a little bit strange, but I don't drink alcohol, but one of my favorite stories is the story of a microbrewery in Melbourne here in Australia. They invested into automation and digitalization technology just a couple of months ago. And as many of the companies around the world, they were very hardly hit by COVID-19. Before COVID, 80% of their production was done in kegs that were delivered to restaurants and bars. So overnight, that basically went away, dried out. Based on technology they had, they quickly pivoted and shifted their manufacturing from keg production to can production. And now 80% of their production is in cans, which they on-sell to distribution. Furthermore, the technology that they used in digitalization, in particular data, enabled them, and mostly their brewmasters, to work from remote. They only had to come to site when really something happened. The whole brewing process was monitored from their homes, from their remote areas. In addition to that, it helped using the data to improve the brewing time from one batch from 23 days to 18 days, which is like a 30% productivity gain. And last but not least, they decided, based on the data and information and the productivity they got, to produce more flavors to keep customer interest. So all that combined made them actually really successful, even in those times of pandemic. And they have been quite successful here in Australia with that go-to-market. So when I'm asking, is digitalization, we use this buzzword so often, a trend and a fashion, or is it really a technology with purpose? I give it a big tick, because it enabled productivity, it enabled flexibility, and it maintained quality. So really using data and automation helped those companies in difficult times to switch. Who can participate? Alex started talking about education. And I want to give you another example. In my department, we have a department that helps customers in digitalization. It's called Digital Enterprise. We have two so-called Industry 4.0 apprentices, and I will elaborate on this a little bit later, and one university student. And those three actually helped us in developing an application, an app, that was working on the cloud to enable customers to quickly make use out of their data. We all know that many customers are uploading tons of data and information into the cloud, but it's very difficult for them to actually get something out of it. The three of them, a university graduate and two Industry 4.0 apprentices, developed an app. This app is now used in more than 30 countries worldwide without a lot of marketing. We have international customers in the US, in Australia, You know, it was on a global shared platform from Siemens, so they adapted it quickly. And it's even used in the Siemens factory to display information. What I wanted to say is, it doesn't matter where you sit. Digitalization doesn't have geographical borders. It takes, of course, a certain education. And I want to pick on a little bit or add to what Alex said. It had started in 2014, actually, between Germany and Australia, when the prime ministers met and said, well, we want to collaborate more on certain aspects. And they came up with 49 recommendations, this panel. And one of, as Alex said, was Industry 4.0. And there was an Industry 4.0 task force built, which signed an agreement between Germany and Australia to collaborate on 5 major streams, cybersecurity, and one was actually education. And in Germany, we have very good experience on education where students are working in university as well as have practical experience in industries. And it took a leap of faith, and Alex was instrumental in that, I have to say, when he was with Swinburne, between Swinburne, a couple of industries, and actually government, to start with a batch of 20 so-called Industry 4.0 apprentices. And those apprentices worked or were educated at university, half of the time, and half of the time they spent time in industry. So all of us came to the table, put some money on, invested, and you see the outcome. Those guys have done a fantastic job, and they do the fantastic job in other industries with other partners, and the program is going on. So once again, I think being successful, and as a nation being successful in Industry 4.0, you need to invest in education, but it has to be a combined investment between industry, government, and education sector.
Thank you, Michael. And there's one aspect that it stood out to me is this. To me, there's a democratization of the possibility to make impact in manufacturing. This notion that someone who, let's say, joining you as an apprentice has developed a solution that was then scaled up globally with a speed that maybe that was not possible in the past. So thanks for sharing that. For our colleagues in attendance, we have a live poll here. If you could share your ideas and insights on the most impactful technologies that are coming to the manufacturing space, we'll be reviewing that in a minute. Bryn, I want to turn to you because your mandate is a bit broader than manufacturing itself, and it's about bringing digital solutions and digitalizing the whole way that a large engineering-intensive corporation like Lockheed Martin works. How is that challenge, and how do you see the difference maybe across nations as you have R&D and manufacturing and service operations across different nations? Bryn, over to Colorado.
Well, thank you, and it's a thrill to be here. I'm honored to join this illustrious panel, and what a great conversation as well. When I think back to the 24 years that I've been at Lockheed Martin, and I can say that this has been the most unique of my career, and 2020 for Lockheed Martin has been both a big challenge, as it is for all of us, I think, but also very fruitful and very successful in ways I didn't expect. Our production floors did not stop. We are essential production workers, manufacturing workers, continued to support their missions and ensured that we were delivering on all of the critical commitments we've made to our customers around the world. But I will say we're operating very differently. We're operating very differently and in ways that I believe will take us into the post-pandemic manufacturing and delivery era. And when I think about what we're doing different, it's about how to bring and accelerate technology to the factory floor in ways that we hadn't imagined before the pandemic. It has been fueled by an improvement or an increase in collaboration, virtual collaboration that we haven't experienced before. And then I'd say it just pushed us to think differently about how we execute our work. So in going into that post-pandemic experience, and I'm thinking about the entire product lifecycle, you mentioned that the focus of my digital transformation work is about the entire product lifecycle. but with the eye towards everything is about driving that efficient manufacturing process, right? So it is all connected. But some of the areas that we have learned is about flexibility. And so where can we bring technology and tools to the hands of our workforce to take advantage of automation? Deborah, I appreciated your comment about, traditionally we look at dull, dirty, dangerous activities for automation solutions, but we're bringing those thinking, that thinking to everything we do now. And so I'm seeing a lot more in automation, and then how we're working better together across our collaboration boundaries, our organizational boundaries, in a way that I don't know if we would have embraced as easily without having the pandemic experience. And I'll say how critical the supply chain has been to us in this last year as well. We have an extensive, as you can imagine, set of partnerships through up to 8,300 different suppliers around 39 different nations. And we have experienced some challenges with the pandemic. And what Lockheed Martin did very quickly was to take action and to accelerate our payments to make sure that we were helping these folks to become robust and viable through the challenges that they were experiencing. And I know that we'll continue to strengthen those partnerships going forward. But when I think about the levers that either a supplier or an emerging nation, an emerging manufacturing company can take advantage of now going into that post-pandemic, it really, in my mind, is around embracing the model-based enterprise. And so when you think of digitizing the work that we do, it has to start from the beginning of the concept of the product, right? And so, where we can enable and encourage and embrace the model-based enterprise thought into what we do together as partners across our industries, I think that will bring the ability for other nations to participate, right? And other emerging small companies to participate. That seamless exchange of engineering and manufacturing information across that product lifecycle, to me, is going to be the key to international product development collaboration. So those who are successful and engaging their engineers across that life cycle through these new tools will be successful, in this new future. Those that are willing to form partnerships around creating that industry-wide model-based enterprise. So what customers, what partners and universities are going to come together to establish standardization or just industry consortiums around the model-based enterprise, I believe will be successful in this future state. And then moving from traditional training programs to reimagining how we train and recruit in this future state, I think is going to be critical for those who will, and those who do that will be successful. So it is about how do we bring a data literacy to all in our workforce. That is a new concept, and that's something we are embracing, but we need everybody in this industry consortium to embrace that same. And then how to have that digital dexterity across not just in your manufacturing workforce, but through all of the different disciplines that contribute to the production process. So I think these are areas and levers that new countries, emerging countries, emerging companies and supply partners can use to be successful in this future state. I think it's quite exciting, actually.
This is very exciting, and your comments are very exciting. I think two things that you mentioned here that really caught my attention. This thing that we need to think differently, and we need to engage early in terms of from the beginning, from the outset, to have like digital models, digital platforms, digital thinking. So thanks for sharing that. But you also provided a great cue for Paul to join us from Ireland, because you mentioned 8,300 suppliers around the globe. And I imagine companies with different sizes, but for sure, many of those are mid-size or could be small companies. So Paul, over to you, because this is something that you are really on the ground. how can this digital wave, and especially digital manufacturing wave, get into the mid-size SME domain? Paul, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. That actually is the very first issue that I did want to address in this short session. We do work with a broad range of small to medium-sized enterprise manufacturers that work in lots of different sectors. And within the last year or year and a half, we have worked with a cluster of these companies to perform what we call a digital readiness level assessment. We use a free-to-use online tool that was developed with public sector funds in the UK. And through the use of this questionnaire and a facilitated workshop with each of these companies, we've been able to focus on 3 broad areas: leadership, technology, and value, all from the point of view of digital technology and what sort of purpose or assistance such technologies can bring to these businesses. And the analysis of the results that we've had access to so far, actually it's encouraging, because some of the issues that are arising have already been referred to in previous panelists' comments. So things like how can digital technologies be used to change our business model? How can we use digital transformation to underpin our working with our suppliers and our customers, so across the whole value chain? From a technology perspective, the issues that have arisen are things like additive manufacturing to make bit pieces or bit parts in situ within small companies, and horizon scanning for technologies. What technologies are out there? And to take the point that I think Michael mentioned earlier, rather than just go for what's fashionable, look for something that is fit for purpose to support what the company needs to do. The problem with small companies is they do not have frequently the resources to spend time looking out into the world to see what technologies are available, what other companies and organizations might be using these for, and what they can learn from that. So our organization has a role to effectively act as an intermediary to try to keep an eye on what's happening in the digital world and make sense of it and interpret that for the small companies that we work with. I think another thing that small companies will need to consider seriously as we look into the future is they need to be flexible enough and prepared to consider diversifying their business. So rather than focusing on perhaps a very narrow line of products to a small group of customers, the experience we've had with some of these companies has been that the COVID pandemic has effectively completely trashed their business model. There's a company, for example, that works in the aerospace industry, and when the bottom fell out of the aviation industry at the start of the pandemic, that had a knock-on impact immediately into aerospace. And one particular company that is one of the premier suppliers to tier 1 aerospace companies in the UK, they specialize in manufacturing plastic components. And they sat back, and they're quite an innovative company, and they thought, well, how can we pivot our manufacturing processes and assets to do something different to sustain us until the aerospace industry picks up again? And effectively, they've designed and developed in very short time a polymer-based face mask that people can use as personal protective equipment. So they've gone from being an aerospace supplier to effectively a health sector supplier, and they've devised this thing called a bubble, B-U-B-L. If you Google it, you'll see what they do. So an awareness of the need to diversify the way the business operates and the products and services that it provides, I think, will be important as well. And finally, I think it was mentioned earlier about supply chain sustainability and supply chain resilience in particular. And we're starting to do some work around this in terms of helping companies that sit in the middle of a supply chain. So they're looking back down the supply chain to their own suppliers and further up the supply chain to their customers, and to help them think about, well, what does it mean to be a reliable supplier in today's world? And I think 2 things come into play there. One is robustness. And what do I mean by that? I mean, how many hits can the company take from external events before they collapse or fall down? And the other one is resilience. How long does it take them to stand up again and get back on their feet and do something different? So looking at how to sustain supply chains in the future will be important. In terms of levers that nations and regions and cities can use, I think principal among these will be funding for appropriate innovation activities, initially raising the awareness of the importance of innovation within an SME environment. And secondly, providing funding support for skills retraining. It's already been mentioned earlier. And I think if the powers that be in government can be persuaded to do so, in terms of how they deploy their funding, to incentivize or perhaps provide a premium level of funding for companies that are prepared to look at green technologies. And I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic at the minute, which has posed an existential threat to humanity, if you think about the number of people that have died. But there's a much greater existential threat that we're faced with, and that's the climate emergency. And different countries have said that by 2035 or 2050, they want to have reached a sort of a net zero carbon sort of economy. 2035, that seems like a long time away, but we can't wait until 2034 before we suddenly wake up and do something about this. So government, I think, has a role to play here, particularly in terms of the building back piece of reviving the economy, investing in infrastructure like social housing and schools and hospitals, but mandating that carbon-friendly materials are used for the manufacturing of these assets, and the manufacturing companies that are involved in so-called off-site manufacturing to supply these assets to the public sector will need to have a strong command of digital technologies, will need to be able to operate across their supply chain seamlessly, as Bryn has mentioned, using technology support. And I think that government also needs to issue some grand challenges. There was a very good example of that earlier this year in the UK, where at the beginning of March, the UK government suddenly realized that the country didn't have enough ventilators for use in intensive care units in hospitals. So they issued this grand challenge to the manufacturing industry in the country, said, look, we need to vastly ramp up our production rate of these machines. And companies from very diverse sectors, aerospace, high performance engineering, automotive, logistics, all came together to form a team to effectively design and build and produce at scalable quantity new ventilator machines. So they started in March with nothing, and within 16 weeks they had produced 11,000 of these machines. And they have said that they were only able to do that through two principal I suppose, interventions. One was the use of digital technologies to support them in what they were doing. And secondly, the need for companies to realize that they had to collaborate, they had to be open in their sharing of data, that the people involved in the team, and I think Siemens was involved as one of the team members. Michael, you may be aware better than I of what their role was. But you know, it didn't matter whether you were CEO of a company or a shop floor operative, you had the same influence to make things happen on this project. So great. You know what, I think that I'll leave it at that, Roberto, in terms of what levers nations can use. I think it is down to the public sector to provide the funding support. There are organizations represented here today and others that are members of the GFCC that can then step in and help to deliver what's needed.
Hey, well, wow, Paul, can I just foot stop something that you said, and you said it so eloquently, but small businesses bring such an important set of diversity and innovation to our global supply chain that it is incumbent upon us to figure out how to make sure they succeed. So
yes, yeah,
right there with you.
And I was very pleased to hear you say that the intervention by such a large company as yours to make sure that the cash flows to your SME suppliers in a timely manner to sustain them during this difficult time, that's very interesting and certainly very welcome, I'm sure, as far as they're concerned.
Yep.
But I would also bring to say that you know, supply chain enablement and excellence is the fundamental enabler for everything we want to do.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think topics that you mentioned here, diversity in terms of different profiles, not just technologies, but in terms of product lines. And I think that it connects to what Michael had said, this notion that with digital, maybe you can break some trade-offs that we had in the past and be able to serve different markets and do other things. But you, Paul, also mentioned the importance of making decisions and being purposeful on investing in innovation. And so thanks for sharing that. And Gianna, our colleague Gianna from Sagazio from Brazil has just joined. And you are one of the leaders who has been making the case for that worldwide and in Brazil. So thanks for doing that. We just closed our poll here. And I think that just want to briefly share the results with everybody. So we invited people to talk about the main technologies that they see reshaping the environment manufacturing. What came first was artificial intelligence, where 47% of the answers. I think it's interesting to notice that before the pandemic, the market for AI was growing 55% a year around the globe. I bet that let's say that has gained momentum with the pandemic. So first AI, second IoT, then robotics and 3D printing. But roughly 50% of the people here joining us from across the globe see AI as the main technology driving the changes that we're talking about. So, and having said that, I want to turn to you, Paulo. You have been seeing changes in the manufacturing environment over the years and over nations. You led Embraer operations in the United States. You are now the global VP for manufacturing, working with your company, but ensure as part of your production system, engaging with a variety of companies and SMEs. So what are the drivers and the enablers that you are seeing for us to build this new manufacturing future? Over to you, Paulo.
Okay, thank you, Roberto, and thank you for inviting me for this discussion here. I'm very honored to be part of this panel. I'd like to start by pointing manufacturing is the driver for innovation. Countries that decided to abandon manufacturing, they give up on keep innovating. Trying to short circuit design to low-cost countries and imagine that manufacturing would be just the dirty part of the chain led us led them to some wrong decisions in my point of view, and to link to what Deborah said, I totally agree that manufacturing drives and keeps the innovation alive. Said that, we have been in this digital journey at Embraer for a long time, and starts exactly by trying to connect operations in different countries, and not just operations, but the engineering, the design of a company inside different houses in different countries as well. And we start also by trying to shorten the cycle time in between the initial concept of a new product through the total deployment in a market, by trying to move as much as possible of our effort through the digital world, and trying to connect these different things and to reuse information from one environment to another environment, and simulate as much as possible. So typically, when you are in an industry like ours, the aircraft industry, to achieve what I would say a stable manufacturing maturity, take some time, some hundreds of products to stabilize the process and so on. And 100 cars at car manufacturing means some hours of manufacturing. 100 cars for aircraft manufacture means, in some cases, more than a year or 2 years to get there. So it's very, very important try to anticipate this maturity by bringing things from the real world through the digital world, because digital is, you can do mistakes there, and you can quickly fail there, and fix things there. It's cheaper than doing it real world. And we start moving machines, buildings, product itself through this digital world, and connecting the world that was an island at the beginning, the CAD world where we design the product, through the shop floor manufacturing execution systems to reuse this information, and preferably doing that using 3D information as much as possible to try to have the same level of knowledge, no matter if you are in Brazil or in US or in Europe or in Mexico, whatever. But being intuitive to our blue collar guys as much as possible, and delivering them very good information, validated in digital world and in the most intuitive way for doing that. And also to connecting that to the final part of the product life cycle, to Michael's point, I truly believe that's about to see from end to end, from the beginning, the very initial phases of development, through the phase out of a product, everything, and connecting this. For instance, since 2012, we abandoned every paper at our shop floor, and we have all digital information at our shop floor. And what was amazing, because sometimes when we deliver an aircraft, at the past, we used to deliver also a truck full of paper, manuals, and so on, to support the aircraft being delivered. And after some time, we digitalized to CDs and so on. But amazing today is that we run in parallel. And when we finish manufacturing of an aircraft, all the documents and the checks and balances and the paperwork needed for the authorities, the certification authorities, is ready at the same time as the aircraft. So it's a huge gain for us, and a little bit on the cooperation as well. We have what we call integrated product development process. So we put together people from different disciplines related to the aircraft. For instance, power plant guys with avionics guys, stress analysis guys, and so on, all together to develop a product. And some years ago, we invested on some immersion 3D environments, enabling us to put at the same session people from different countries to do, for instance, a design review for a product. So we have been using these different aspects of digital manufacturing to enable us to shorten our cycle time, and also to be more precise on what we deliver to our shop floor and after to our customers as well. So trying to summarize, that's the journey we have been doing at our digital manufacturing at Embraer.
This is super exciting. This is super exciting, Paulo. One of the things that I did in one of my past lives, I was in the manufacturing space. So it's amazing to hear that from you. So thanks for sharing. But I would leave one question for you for the following round is, how did you prepare people working across nations, across cultures, across levels in the hierarchy? How was that journey of preparing people? Yeah. And when I say preparing people, I take the opportunity to transition to Pelayo Covarrubias. Pelayo, you are not in the manufacturing space. You are in the national space, trying to push a whole country to become more digitalized. How you see those things that we talked about here, and digitalization in general, and what are you doing in Chile? And it's amazing to have Chile represented here and to have you with us, Pelayo. Over to you.
Well, thanks, Roberto, a lot, to GFCC for the invitation. Thanks for all the panels. I guess we have a great conversation. Thank you, Deborah, too. This is, I guess, very, very interesting about what you're talking about. Let me begin with some worldwide comment. We are in the middle of the COVID lab. let's go to science. The world this year is having this COVID lab that is changing everything. In 6 months, it's happened more than a decade in digital transformation. So if we really want to have a talking and a good conversation about what will happen in the next 5, 10, or 20 years, we have to understand what happened this year in how we accelerate the digital transformations due to the COVID. And if we will have another coronavirus in the next 5, 10, or 20 years, because the world is changing so fast, because this COVID lab, that's difficult to answer your question, Robert. That's for first. Second, if we talk about this COVID lab, let me give you 4 samples of how our life is changing. First, our family life. Most of the people, I don't know you, but in Chile, are living with their kids in their houses. They're having home schools. They're having to teach their own kid in the house. So that has changed a lot, all of the manufacturing changes, because we're now teach our kids in our own home school how to work. They are listening us how we work. That never happened before in the life. So if we see the next 5 or 10 years, I can assure you that all the manufacturing that we used to how to work, this will change, because our kids that will get out to the universities, think about this year, all of our university school are in our house studying, sharing with us, with like a parents, our feeling, our teaching. So this is the first point that I want to tackle. How is the family changing? Second, how we are changing. We are working, I don't know, 12, 14 hours a day, 15 hours a day. We wake up in the morning, we stay in a room, and we work all the day without transitions. We know now we don't go up to a bar after we work. So now that is changing our personal life. I don't know how many of you are making sport among this year, or how change your life this COVID lab. So I guess we have to talk these issues before talk manufacturing, because this is changing the way that we work, the way that we live the world. Third, how it's changing the place where we work. If I am chairman of a foundation in where we push all of the digital transformation in the last 20 years in Chile. We have the 25 big worldwide companies, digital companies. All of these companies, they're locking down their offices, and they're telling us that they will mix the office in a co-work, and then we will have another part of the office in their homes. How we will change the services that we use in the world due to these changes in the place of work. And finally, and I guess the most important thing is the entrepreneurship mind. How it's changing the way of think the new product. How it's changing the new way of use the new product that we are every day taking, the e-commerce. In United States, at the end of 2019, Deborah maybe should know this, 19% was e-commerce, 19%. Amazon, their dream was in 2025, get to the 24% in e-commerce. At the end of the second quarter in United States, they had 43% of e-commerce. That changed everything. That 43% in e-commerce changed everything. So what happened for my vision, Roberto, and I am very agree with Michael Setz from Siemens. Michael talked about education. I only think that the most important thing now is how we change education. And let me show you in a little sample what happened in Chile. For me, for País Digital Foundation, the most important thing is how to reduce the gap, the digital gap. We have more than 80% of the people that you have a broadband, but we still have people that don't have broadband. There's separate world. Some people live in Earth, some people live in Mars without broadband. Second issue, what happened about how we use broadband? People, for instance, 40% use internet to educate, to training. 90% use internet to play. So if we are using internet to play or to training, they have a huge difference in the future. If we see our kids now, 90% of them, they're playing PlayStation. So I can teach you that in the next 10 years, the future of work is our kids now, how to play in PlayStation, they will be working. Because who is teaching now our kids? The schools or social media? So when I try to put all of these issues that I try to tackle you, my point is we are facing a huge geopolitical change in the world. In between Asia, look, United States these days, how they're counting their votes. Look about Europe, and we can see how we will put in the future all of this digital, but not digital transformation, cultural transformation. So to end this part, Roberto, I guess when we are talking about preparing people, I have to be agree with Brin and about flexibility, collaboration, new ways of training. Good, Brin, I totally agree with you. But we have to accelerate that, because I guess when we listen the people talking about manufacturing, or we listen people about talking factories, says this COVID lab changed that for always. We will see a new world from this COVID lab, and this is changed a lot in the entrepreneurial mind of our kids, that they are getting teach in our school with us, learning from us.
I really resonate
Lyle.
with what you're saying. I would say this is not a technology challenge. Our biggest challenges with all of what we're talking about is about culture change, right? It's about culture shift, and how do we accelerate that with our heritage cultures to be successful in the future. So I totally resonate with how you describe that.
Technology is all around the world in the last 2,000 years or 7,000 years.
Yep.
Great topic to continue our conversation, how to accelerate that change. And saying that, for if you are joining us here, we have another poll that is open that it's really related to that. What are the key issues that we need to advance, like manufacturing and digital manufacturing, are the things that we're talking here. So we have a poll that's open, please join us. And we also have some comments and questions coming, and I think that they were touching up on things that you, Brin, and Pelayo just comment here. How can we change, how can nations at a larger scale go into this direction? But before we go around and we get other comments from you all, Deborah, I want to turn to you to reflect on this amazing series of insights that we just heard.
Thank you, Roberto. Well, I'm happy that we're recording this session because it is so rich with insights and experience. And I know Michael talked early on about, the important metric of productivity. At the end of the day, what we are talking about productivity enhancements and what that delivers to our standards of living and prosperity. Alex, you talked about, the critical new manufacturing strategy being developed in Australia at the highest level with your prime minister. Again, recognition of the sovereign importance of having manufacturing capability and assets and building the enterprise. Something I think that might add to the discussion here, we haven't talked too much about additive manufacturing, and of course the digital component of that, to be able to send a blueprint and have it immediately in real time being fabricated through additive processes. Next time, Roberta, we should get the CEO of Loco Motors on, that's bringing that digital manufacturing right into countries around the world through additive systems in transportation. But technology with a purpose, of course, technology exists, tools and capabilities to just enhance our lives, but enable us to do things better. Criticality of the supply chain. I think we all talked about that, Paolo and Bryn, and I love the model-based enterprise that was described as really how we're going to need to work in the future. Paolo on the great issues around culture and how we're going to educate. I think also, this whole issue that you brought up, Paul, about how we bring the small and medium-sized enterprises into the ability to work with large-scale corporations at the cutting edge, and obviously Embraer, Lockheed Martin, and Siemens have to do this in order to have the businesses and capabilities and innovation they have. I did want to share, because Lockheed Martin was one of the founding partners of an initiative the U.S. Council on Competitiveness led some years ago called Endemic, the National Digital Engineering Consortium. And Lockheed Martin, General Electric, Procter & Gamble, and Deere came together with some of our leading universities and government partners to actually design a new way, a new partnership to bring modeling and simulation tools into the supply chain of the Midwest manufacturers. And the reports are still there. They're fabulous. We can post those. But what was amazing, there were companies, and Michael, you'll appreciate this working for Siemens, there were companies that were on the verge of going bankrupt, and having access to these design tools through modeling and simulation. This was supercomputing. They became within 6 months exporters to Germany. So that was an incredible metric. And so how we knit the small and medium companies with these large enterprises in the digitization is something that I think is absolutely key to the future, and unleashing the innovators as well. I am cognizant of the fact that we do live in a physical world, and we have to remember that things are also made and produced in environments that cost huge amounts of money. And I will signal out, while we see digitization and acceleration of that in the design and production of advanced semiconductors, putting up a fab to produce these systems that enable everything in our digital world cost, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that's a challenge also as we move forward in ensuring national sovereignty and capabilities in these fields. And the last thing I want to say is on the digital divide, the digital gap. I think one of the SDGs of the United Nations should be the universal right to electricity and the ability to function in the digital world. And I can speak for the United States, we still have a huge digital divide in dense urban areas, in rural areas, children not having access to the equipment they need for remote learning. So I'm being a little bold here. We've coined in the US Council and our National Commission, net neutrality is obsolete. We need net equality now. And that's something that's also going to unleash this great transformation. So I'm going to say my formal thank yous now to everybody. I know there'll be some more discussion, but we're just thrilled and honored you all joined us for this fabulous discussion.
Amazing comments, Deborah. And you just touched upon some of the things that we captured here on our poll, and we can finish that. So we invited everybody to reflect on what are the key issues that we should address to move forward this whole digital reality, right? The options were skills, regulation, business models, and infrastructure. 50% of the participants said that skills is the primary thing that we should address. Preparing people, right? Developing the skills, changing mindsets. The second thing, infrastructure. I think like Deborah just mentioned, this digital gap, this divide that we have around the globe. So having said that, I want to turn back to you, Michael, Paulo, Alex, Bryn, Paul, what's needed? What are some of the concrete cases and examples that you are seeing around the globe, that you are working on, that are moving the needle in relation to those things? Who'd like to go first?
I might start,
Alex.
Roberto. I'm really not surprised seeing that the poll showed that the skills aspect is seen as the key enabler of the transformation. It's you know, as Bryn also mentioned, and I've always kind of believed in that this whole transformation is about people. It's about people and enabling people to be the leaders of transformation, you know, and skills are critical for that. This is one of the reasons we've commenced, you know, a number of pilot programs, and as you've mentioned, turning them into scalable models. I love the model-based enterprise that Bryn has mentioned, you know, developing models, scalable models to build on. So Siemens and my network that I lead have partnered to develop something like that. And that involved, for example, a model where Siemens and its supply chain across Australia selected SMEs, got together. We co-designed a diploma program in Industry 4.0, which is moving them to associate degree, which has embedded training and education in industry, where industry is an active participant. And it's kind of a blurring the boundaries, because it's really about co-design and co-delivery of education, which Paleo said, time for new models in education. This was about trialing new models of education and delivering that program to a cohort who actually from the outset were ending up as employees across that supply chain. And they are the agents of change. You know, through that transformation, they've already commenced transforming those companies. And following the completion of the programs, they were really the champions of change in those companies. I think that model is scalable. We've worked on that now across the country in various pilot locations. And we believe that through that workforce development, where we are co-designing with industry and co-delivering with industry, you know, skills programs that are around digital skills, but also not just digital skills. Our research shows that it's not just the digital skills that are important for digital transformation. As Paleo mentioned, you know, there are a number of other, you know, traditionally called soft skills or cognitive skills or enduring skills around change management, around working in multifaceted, diverse teams, around working across complex ecosystems, around, you know, resilience, a whole lot of skills that are part of that Industry 4.0 transformation that we sometimes take for granted, that's something you develop through experience. It is actually essential in a new model of education and training. So trialing those elements has shown us that transformation at that SME level happens successfully through people development.
One
Could I
thing
jump in on this one too?
Yes, please, Bryn.
I'm sorry, because I am very passionate about this piece. And I think to just build on what you were saying, Alex, we need to make this new reality real to our existing employees, but also our future employees. So at Lockheed Martin, we're looking at it from a two-pronged approach, right? So we're looking at how do you pair these new early career professionals with senior folks, with our technicians on the floor, get the energy and the excitement through that learning and transition planning, and then really use those new empowered folks as champions, really to grow the excitement around what that future looks like. And then on the future workforce, you know, how do we better partner with universities to shape the curriculums so that those new skills, because when you think about the folks we need now and are going to need more of, they're going to be part mechanic, part IT, part engineer, part data scientist, right? And so how do we shape those curriculums to get the skills we need at scale? And from a Lockheed Martin perspective, really looking at where we can enable underrepresented communities where we're focusing on STEM programs for girls or for people of color. It's very important for us to grow those pipelines. And so those are the things that Lockheed Martin is focused on as we look to grow, excite, make it real, and scale that future workforce.
Roberto, may I add something to this? I'm so passionate about this, and hearing what Bryn was explaining as their example and the views about this approach. It's exactly that is at the heart of the transformation, what you've explained. Roberto would know exactly for that reason, also in this pilot that we've been developing, we've also involved the National Manufacturing Workers Union, exactly because of that engagement of the workforce and the work environments actively in transformation now, not just in the future, and having all the stakeholders engaged. And as you say, Bree, enthusing them to be the champions of change.
Yeah, maybe I would love to add something additional to this. It also starts with us learning. I mean, we are all senior leaders in companies and in institutions and things like that. And maybe 10 years ago, I would have said my knowledge is good enough, to carry me to the rest of my professional career. But with digitalization, I mean, the innovation cycles are so quick, the technologies are so quick. Every 2, 3, 4 years, you have new technologies. I mean, it starts with us and saying, well, we need to continuously learn and can't sit on our laurels, which we have done over the years. And that also helps us to understand the new workforce, as everybody said. I think we need to keep pace. We need to learn too. The whole organization needs to learn.
Deborah?
I just want to, a little bit of context around the cultural dimension of how people view manufacturing. I mean, we're all talking about the advanced manufacturing transformation that we know and understand and underway. But for large components of our populations, and one of our Council on Competitiveness wonderful CEO members, Nick Pinchuk, the CEO of Snap-on Tools, says, manufacturing, going into manufacturing is the second prize, the third prize when your child doesn't, quote, get into college. And, anecdotes tell stories. I recently was with a gentleman who'd been a manager at one of the Target stores and was telling me his son is a skilled electrician at one of our major universities, makes well over $100,000 a year. He said, I had all these college graduates at Target that were, working the cash register with no plan going forward. And Germany's done such a superb job in vocational training. And Brazil as well, I think, through SEBRAE and everything. How do we do a better job of changing the narrative around advanced manufacturing enterprise is one of the most exciting dynamic fields to be in for your future? I pose that.
Yeah, maybe Paulo, if I could tee you up for that. So,
Okay.
And
let me jump in on that. First, I'd like to connect to Brink's idea that is the same as myself. I think we must bring more diversity to this game. And it starts by emphasizing the STEM careers at the early ages of our kids. What I feel is missing, there's a gap there, because I could see it in US as well, years I lived in US. Typically get engineers, we get data science, STEM career kind of professionals, are almost the same profile. Boys, same age, same, let's say, kind of family and so on. And the diversity brings the richness to this game. And to your point of SEBRAE and SESI and the other systems in Brazil, what I can see they are doing here hard is trying to trigger this interest in these kids at earliest age possible, and bring them to the schools. And at Embraer in particular, we also have a school here, even though we manufacture crafts, but we have experience on the educational side as well. And we provide a high school for very poor kids here around the company. And in Brazil is, I would say, a little bit different from US. The best universities are public. You pay zero to go through a very good university course. But in the other side, to get there, unless you came from a wealthy family that is able to pay you a very good elementary school, middle school, and high school, you never get there. And what we did here was to experience something different. So you offer the best possible kind of training for these kids at mainly high school. And we get a kind of almost 90% success rate on putting these poor kids at public universities here. And we do that by training them and by offering also the opportunity to experience things. So trying to move from the boring classes that you have just a guy speaking something and kids trying to take notes and so on, to offer them more labs, more space to have them experiencing these kind of things, and creating their mental models by themselves. And we get success on doing that. And what I could see in this SEBRAE and SESI and so on systems, where we are getting success in Brazil is exactly by offering more practical classes, more labs, more experimentational room for this kind of kids. That's say my 2 cents.
Thank you, Paulo. That's much more than 2. Yeah, and so thanks for sharing that. And you actually comment on something that we are doing in the GFCC. I had a chance to talk with Alex in the past, but we working with our colleagues at the Industry Confederation in Brazil, the National Industry Confederation. We engage with a variety of players around the globe to see how this whole thing about the skills, it's being driven. And 2 things we identified as very important. It started early. There's a growing number of schools initiatives that want to engage kids as early as possible in technology, digital, etc. And the other thing is social capital. That I think connects to what Deborah said, but it really is about your initiative, Alex. It's very strong because you have the social capital needed to build all those partnerships. And having said that, Pelayo, if you could comment, you are the one who brought to the table this thing about amplifying a mindset shift, and you built a foundation to do that throughout your country. So what's key to make this change happen at a large scale?
Thank you, Roberto. I guess we are in the middle of a huge bridge in between the 20th centuries and 21st century. And sometimes we are talking differently. We are talking about sometimes a transactional world in where the services doesn't have much to say. I am thinking about services like Uber, Airbnb, the big ones services. And now in this new world, the 21st century world, which is the knowledge world. I guess it's more important when we talk about manufacturing, we talk about the knowledge transfer, how we are doing this knowledge and the transfer of all of this intellectual property in this new world. I guess when I'm trying to talk about entrepreneurship mind, I am thinking now that the way that we manufacture in the 20th centuries will be totally changed after this COVID. The most important thing will be logistic. I agree in that. Logistic is fundamentally more than manufacture. Because in manufacture, we know that we have the automatization, we have robotic, we have many things to help manufacturing. But in logistic, we have a huge issue again. And this issue this pandemic show us the issue of the logistics. So what we are thinking in a digital country here in Chile, how we push our country, our services to this knowledge new world, in where we have to teach the people in how to transfer knowledge, know how to transfer manufacturing. We are thinking in my father have one job in their life. I have like 5 jobs. My son will have 5 or 7 jobs in a month because it's changing the way that we used to work. So I guess when we are trying to push these kind of things in Chile, is try to teach the teachers in how they have to be the flexibility and the skill to teach this new world of transfer knowledge. And that, sorry, is a huge cultural change. because it's very difficult to understand. Because if you are used to work all your life in one factory, now that's end. So how you change that?
Roberto, Deborah asked a question in terms of how do we change the perception and how do we change the view of manufacturing? And I think Pelayo has actually touched upon that a little bit. We've seen manufacturing in the past as something that, you know, you put in a factory, there's a factory floor, there are machines in the factory, and you make things on those machines. As Pelayo kind of tried to reflect on that, that view is completely changed because manufacturing, modern manufacturing, is something completely different. We're talking about cyber physical systems. We're talking about cyber physical systems integrated across, you know, with Internet of Things platforms that are much more broadly seen, you know, from ideation across product lifecycle management using digital platforms to supply chain and closing the loops and so on. We're also seeing the space industry emerging, where satellite obtained data is driving Industry 4.0 in manufacturing because it provides in real time amazing data that optimizes the supply chains and logistics that Pelayo was talking about, and that are enabling manufacturing globally via digital means better than ever before. So if we are able to shift the dial and start changing the narrative around manufacturing, that it's IoT, that it's Internet of Things, that are digital platforms, PLMs, we are looking at sophisticated digital platforms that require, you know, higher levels of creativity, systems thinking, design thinking, hyperconnectivity to create value. I think we have a different value proposition for the younger generations. But I think, as Deborah pointed out quite rightly, we are at the stage of, I think, where we need to develop that different narrative. And we need to provide a different value proposition to new generations in terms of entering manufacturing. And I think all the ingredients are there to do that.
Shift the dial. Love to that. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment based on what Pelayo said there a few moments ago about the importance and the growing importance of logistics. The Ventilator Challenge project that I mentioned earlier in this session really could not have succeeded without the participation of the logistics partner, DHL, who in very short notice had to source multiple parts from multiple suppliers, bring them to a number of different assembly points, and then ship the final product out to the health service users. That was a critical role in that project. And I think you're absolutely right. I would agree that in the future, that'll become even more important as product design and development for many companies in the future is likely to take into account international collaborative supply chains or consortiums or teams working together on design and manufacture, and the physical shipment and transfer of bits and pieces around the world is actually going to be very is crucially important to that. Yeah. So the use of digital technologies to underpin logistics as a service, I think, will be critical.
Thank you, Paul. As we're approaching the end of our session, actually we're running out of time here. I want to maybe go for a final round, concluding round here. Starting with you, Deborah, and then. But I wanted to tee you up and suggest one thing. In that final comment, if each one of you could share one example or something that you have seen or that you believe that people should look at around the globe as a concrete solution to address some of this challenge that we're talking about. Deborah?
I'm going to just go back to something I said in the beginning of our session, and again, thank everyone, that a nation that loses its manufacturing infrastructure at whatever stage it is in its development, whether it was 19th century, 20th, mid, and now the future, you also lose your innovation of the next generation because they're very inextricably linked. And I can remember back in the 80s when the United States lost the ability to innovate in some of the next generations of flat panel displays, which we had invented because we lost and gave up the manufacturing of them. So innovation and advanced digital 21st century manufacturing are all linked together. And again, the people that enable all of that have to have this very diverse set of skills and capabilities that our great panel has articulated, from being both systemic thinkers and also having the ability for linear execution. So again, thank you all for participating in this GFCC conversation.
Downloads manufacturing, and we need to integrate competencies. Thank you for that, Deborah. So Paul, maybe could I turn to you?
Yes, just one very quick example, Roberto. It's related, but not directly related to the subject of this discussion. A company that I've been working with for the last few years. It's the largest sawmill on the island of Ireland and one of the most highly optimized and automated sawmills in Europe. In a new boardroom that they constructed on a large wall, they have put the UN Sustainable Development Goals up on this wall. And against each of those goals, they've made a statement as to how they as a company and their people are actually working to help their business and their region achieve or do their part to achieve those goals, and where technology can help, that is mentioned. And I think that is an excellent example of how to stimulate cultural change within a company with a view to addressing the most existential threat that we as a race face, which is the climate emergency.
Thanks for sharing that, Paul. And whatever you could share here or send us, we would love to disseminate that example in the GFCC network. Michael, maybe you could share. I loved your brewery example. I wish they could ship overseas, but maybe if you could share another idea, solution that they have seen.
Now, I wanted to, reflect on what Deborah said and Pelayo said. Basically, I think digitalization is a savior for manufacturing. Manufacturing is not as in the 20s anymore, dirty and those kind of things. There's so much of, as Alex said, so much of software, so much of electronics. Manufacturing places look completely different. And Pelayo, you said about playing pay stations and things like that. I mean, there's so much more augmented reality coming into manufacturing. There's so much more of these aspects actually from games coming honestly into manufacturing, which make manufacturing more attractive. And we just have to talk about it. In addition to that, I wanted to maybe finally say, so now people are saying, well, I need to have a college degree to work in manufacturing. No, you don't. Because on the other hand side, technology will be more easy to be used. You don't have to be a C++ programmer in the future to work with software. We are working, and many companies are working on graphical design of software. So I think, in a nutshell, I think it's the best time for manufacturing that has been there for the last probably 50, 60 years. With all the changes that we see and what digitalization puts into, it makes it much more attractive than it has been before.
Wonderful. So visibility, we need to provide visibility to those opportunities and possibilities. Paulo, over to you.
I'm mute here. I try to bring thing I catch up some years ago during a visit to some Fraunhofer institutes in Germany, where they develop new technologies, but they are very linked to the industry as well. And it wake me up that everybody but Germans were concerned about Chinese competition and so on. And they were not, because they were looking years ahead of everybody and looking everything about Industry 4.0 and how to connect and to be flexible and to bring the digitalization to the shop floor and reorganize quickly in a very competitive way the shop floor. And I bring that with myself and trying to see what else we could do in order to apply this kind of things. And what I could see, what you mentioned, Senai here in Brazil was doing, I think is very similar way. They put some excellence centers in some parts of Brazil. And the doing is a very similar thing to connect industry, real problems to the research, but also the educational side of this and working these three pillars: the educational pillar, the problem solving pillar as a research center, and the company in need of this kind of help, connecting all these dots to provide a more comprehensive solution, not just on developing a new technology or solution, but also providing skilled people to keep going that. So that's a thing I would like to share with you.
Great. This idea of mixing different worlds, stakeholders, and
Exactly.
training with actually implementation.
And bridging these things that typically, at least here in Brazil, the industry was one thing, the educational side was other industry, and the technology developer was other as well, to bridging these gaps and bringing together all these different dimensions. Okay.
Great. As I said in the beginning, we were lucky and happy to take a group of our GFCC Universal Research Leadership Forum for a workshop at Embraer last year. So thanks for that. We had directors for US national labs, university leaders from across the globe. We would love to do it again and work with you and your colleagues. So thanks for that.
Hope to do it soon, just after COVID. Please feel yourself invited.
That's fantastic, Paulo. Thank you. Pelayo, you shared a very creative idea here. What could we do, or what are some of the examples that we could leverage to drive the realities that you were talking about?
Thank you for that. I want to end with two things in a way to explain a little bit more this one job in 70 years, 7 jobs in 70, and 7 jobs for a month. I guess one is the importance of the modernized governments of the state. I guess it's very, very important we talk a little bit about the importance that they're having, and more in the future, I guess, the states. For instance, in Chile, we have like 40% of the procedures, the public procedures, they are digital. But we are working to get, in the 2021, that the 100% of all of the procedures that you have to make like a citizens be digital. That is very important in a way to have a modern and flexibility state who help you in a way to have this entrepreneurship new ecosystem in the 21st century when we're talking about knowledge. If you have a state that doesn't have institutions who allows you or enhance you in a way to be flexibility in your job, it's impossible. That is one point that I guess is very, very important. And the second point, and I guess Alex and Bryn tackled this very, very deeply, is about human capital. I guess we have to change the way how we teach our kids, I guess, in for the future. Today, we already have the knowledge in the internet. It's all there. So it's how we use all of that knowledge that we all know. For the first time in the history of the human being, we have all 8.5 billion people connected. So now we are having this meeting. That is amazing, this meeting. And we didn't realize this 50 years ago. But this COVID lab give all the world this possibility. Now we have 50 people listen us. Yesterday I have a meeting with 6,000 people listen me. So you say, hey, what I am talking about, that 6,000 people are willing to listen you, is because now it's allowed to do that and to have this knowledge transfer more easily. That is, Roberto, I guess we have a huge opportunity to help our people. And please, and this is for all of the people who are listening us, in this new 21st century, we have to be very careful with this digital bridge or digital gap. People who is out of this gap is out of the world. So that people will be very, very poor, more poor than will be in the 20th century. So I guess this is very important too. Thank you a lot for the invitation. It was a real pleasure to have a meeting with all of you. Thank you.
To be continued. Knowledge is not a gap. How could we how can we work together to better use the resources that we have? How could we do that, Alex?
I'm enjoying this panel so much. I just hope it lasts longer than what we planned. I might just give a couple of examples. I think we haven't mentioned this, and I think it's important to mention at the end of this discussion that to address the skills needs rather than gap skill needs, and because there will be a gap and a need continuously. We are not going to have a fifth or a sixth industrial revolution. We're going to have this ongoing transformation. It's a dynamic change. We moved into a completely different era. So lifelong learning is at the center, at the heart of us addressing the skill needs. And that has to be enabled, that has to be supported. Two examples that I've seen that are really addressing that lifelong learning need and capacity are from Switzerland and from Singapore, where government has provided a voucher, skills voucher, a lifelong skills voucher, or a digital passport for every citizen to engage and access training in digital domains to address their needs on an ongoing basis. And that provides access to all. It aims to address the digital divide, but also it makes it accessible, affordable, easier, and scalable. I think that that's something I'm passionate about, and I'll be talking to our government about that, the digital passport, the skills voucher, because I think that's the way, as Pelayo actually quite rightly said, is that's where we move from a sector to a society transformation. And I think that's what we all want to see.
Thank you, Alex. And I know that we will be continuing this whole conversation in the GFCC with you. Thank you for your leadership in the things that we're doing. Bryn, your final thoughts.
Thank you. This has been fun too, so I appreciate the time to spend with all of you today. I think I'll end with a call to action, actually, if I could, and that would be to have us all embrace and break down the barrier or perception that you can't have a robust internship program during the type of virtual work that we're experiencing now. And when I think of what Lockheed Martin did over the last several months, we really doubled down and we focused on vibrant virtual internships, relationships with trade schools in a way that we hadn't thought of before, scholarships with those trade schools, apprenticeships, so very different models of how to engage the future workforce. North of 2,500 students this last summer alone, and we vie to hire every one of them when they come through their program. So don't buy into virtual stuff, and internships are hard, but really work with us to make the most robust experiences we can for those interns and those co-ops.
It's time for action. Thank you for sharing that, Bryn. Deborah, any final comments just for us to finalize?
Yes, I guess manufacturing, smart, safe, sustainable searching. Thank you all. It was wonderful. And I hope we will get to be in person sometime, but I agree, always in something that's dark and challenging, there's light and opportunities, and we're seeing that here. So, and thank you, Roberto, for your leadership. I hope everybody will tune in on November 17th and 18th for the 2020 Global Innovation Summit of the GFCC, Crossing the Chasm in Healthcare and Advanced Technology. We're thrilled that the Australian Ministry of Health, Minister Greg Hunt, will be one of our keynote speakers, interviewed by the chairman of the U.S. Council, Mahmood Khan. Our GFCC chairman, Chad Holliday, the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell, will be with us, and fabulous speakers from Australia, but very importantly, GFCC members around the world. So we have 2 days, and I know the time is structured, so our Australian colleagues like Alex will not be up at the crack of dawn, or we on our side will not be up all night long. But Roberto, is there anything you want to add on the summit? I know we want people to register. We've got a great turnout already, but we're going to talk about many of these things. And the innovation theme that's going to take us to the future economy.
Yeah. So as this is really about the digital world, I do have something analog to show to all of you. So please, you can go here and register for the 2020 Global Innovation Summit, gis2020.thegfcc.org. Please join us in the virtual and the analog world.
And are we going to get a picture?
A picture. That's it. Before we go, we're taking a group picture here. So please look at the camera and smile. This is a GFCC tradition. It was great to have you here. We're having the summit once again, gis2020.thegfcc.org. Please go there, register now, November 17th and the 18th. But also next week, in partnership with one of the universities in our University Research Leadership Forum, the University of Southampton, we're having a conversation in which we want to decode the now in education. Join us on the 12th. And this was a great conversation. I have two takeaways. Shift the dial, and the time is now for us to take action. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.